we're going to go over today. High cash flowing vacation rentals, the 3-step blueprint to get greater income and more freedom. So if that's what you're here for, then you're in the right place. So let's jump right in. So the strategy that I'm going to cover today, like I mentioned, there's 3 parts to this. So the first one is get the deal, clarity on the outcome, the market, and the deal. There's a lot of questions around this. The second step is to transform the property into a vacation rental. So build your team and back into your vision. And then finally, the last step in this process is to automate the cash flow and an amazing guest experience, because that's what it's all about. Leveraging the tools and systems to ensure that each guest feels special without losing your sanity. That last part is key because it's very easy to lose your sanity in this business if you're not doing it the right way. So this is a value-packed webinar. This is not something where I'm just going to gloss over stuff. Obviously, I can't teach absolutely everything there is to know about short-term rentals in one webinar, but I'm going to teach a lot. There's 50 slides here, and they all are packed with tons of information. So all I'm asking is that you turn off all distractions and be here, because it's very tempting. I know I've done this before where I'm listening to a webinar and I start scrolling through Facebook or email. So I just ask that you be present, because you're going to get a lot more out of this. So where are most people? Most people in this world are dependent on their day job. They're trading dollars for time. And if they ever stop that hustle, they fly off the treadmill that they've created for themselves. Maybe you can relate to that. What vacation rentals can provide, and what they have provided for lots of people, is significant cash flow that replaces your W-2 income so that you have the ability to work because you want to work. You can travel when you want to travel. You can spend time with your family while doing something that is extremely fulfilling. That's what I've found with vacation rentals. So who is this webinar for? So you are in the right place if you're ready to take action, that you feel like some of this action might be uncomfortable, but it's going to have a life-changing impact on your family's financial freedom. Usually it's the stuff that is pretty uncomfortable that makes the biggest change in our lives. You've been thinking about owning vacation rentals for a while, but you keep running into obstacles like finding, financing, or furnishing the properties. So it seems like there's always 1 or 2 things that people run into that stop them in this process. And so hopefully we can get past some of those things today, because it might be one thing that's very easy to overcome, and it's holding you back from making tens of thousands of dollars in cash flow. You've done a lot of research and you've got a lot of information, but you want to better understand how it all fits together and translates into a system for high cash flowing deals. That's the key. You can understand a lot. There's a lot of people who know a lot of information, but until you understand how it all fits together into a system, it's very difficult to implement. And also, maybe you've had challenges around running the numbers on vacation rentals. It's a very common challenge. You're unsure if something you buy will actually get booked consistently. That's a big fear for people. Like, they're going to go out and sink hundreds of thousands of dollars into something, and then it might be crickets and nobody's booking their place. So this is not for you if you're looking for a get-rich-quick scheme, and if you don't want to work, because there is some work that goes into this. It is very, what's the term for it? There's a book that I love called Effortless, and the term that he uses is residual work. So this is some of the highest residual work that you could possibly do, to where you put in the work up front, create the system, and then it pays you indefinitely. It's not like you're trading dollars for time. You're an information or seminar junkie and you're unwilling to take action. We all know those people. You're more interested in looking successful than actually having financial freedom. I'm not throwing stones here. I was in this camp, where you try to fake it until you make it. The only problem with this is that a lot of times you're so focused on looking good that you're giving up on opportunities to actually make real progress. So I'm all about just focusing on making real progress. And I don't care how I look. You are convinced that you know everything there is to know and have the ultimate investing strategy, and you're not open to evolving. I think we all probably know those people who are the smartest person in the room, and they're the first person to tell you that. So what you will get out of this, I am huge on identifying the exact outcome of anything that I'm going to do. This wasn't something that I used to do, and it was a problem. And I see this as a big problem in people's lives. So if I'm ever going to start a webinar, or I'm going to start a project, or I'm going to buy a house, or I'm going to do anything, I'm very specific on, at the end of all this work, what's going to be there? Why am I doing this? Because if you don't, what you can find is a year later, you're just working on something that you forgot even why you're working on it. What it's going to provide you with, the outcome is very muddy. So this webinar is going to do two things. First thing is it's going to provide you an understanding of the three main phases that are required for investing in high cash flowing vacation rentals. And the second thing is it's going to give you the ability to move forward and take the next step in achieving financial freedom, because it's one step at a time. And if you get stuck in one place, then you're not moving toward that goal of financial freedom. So stay tuned till the end, because we're going to do Q&A. So I'm going to try to get through all of the content portion in an hour, and then I'll stay as long as you want. So if you've got questions, stuff comes up throughout the webinar, I'll open it up at the end and we'll go through all the questions that you've got. I'm an open book. But before we dive in, a little bit of background, because I know several people who are on this webinar right now. And I've met them before, but there's quite a few people who this might be the very first time you've ever interacted with me or ever come across me. So hello, welcome. So I'll just give you a little bit about my background and what qualifies me to teach on this topic. So in 2011, I left the security of my full-time job. I'd served in the military as an officer for 11 years with a consistent paycheck that entire time, basically from the time I graduated high school till 11 years later. But I was fed up with the bureaucracy, and with having someone else tell me when and where I needed to be. It became a job that I just wasn't super passionate about anymore. I knew I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to create my own business. I was attracted to real estate. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad while I was in the Army, and I knew that I wanted something that the harder I worked at it, the more it would pay me. And so I went from the security of my job in the Army to investing in real estate full time. I didn't really have a clear outcome in mind. Again, going back to what I just said about having the clear outcome before you start anything. I wasn't clear about why I was getting into real estate or what the outcome was that I was after, but I just started flipping properties because it seemed like that's what people do to make money in real estate. You can make money pretty quickly. So we started with one flip. Then we started doing multiple properties. Then we got an office and we started hiring a staff. We started doing some big marketing campaigns, and we grew pretty quickly. The team really took off and grew, and we got to the point where we were doing 20 deals at a time, and we won awards. This was actually we were getting the Rich Dad Hall of Fame. So the Robert Kiyosaki Rich Dad Hall of Fame, we were inducted into it, my partners and I. So this was out in Las Vegas. This is Paul Lasajan from Flip This House. He was giving us an award it was like an MVP award because we were in their flipping program, and we had done a ton of deals. And so people were recognizing us as sort of the authorities in the market. We were invited to speak at a lot of events. I was invited on this radio show on real estate. The only problem was that after 5 years of flipping, I was exhausted, and I was not any closer to my goal of financial freedom. So these are pictures that my wife, she thinks she's a comedian. She took pictures of me everywhere we were going because I kept falling asleep because I was just like beat. I would work super hard and then we'd get a break and go somewhere and then I'd fall asleep all the time. So that's not so much anymore with kids. You can't really sleep like that. But I was worn out. We had made millions. We also spent millions. And in our big push toward a goal of growth, I never accumulated any assets along the way. So for 5 years, we had flipped over 70 properties and I owned nothing that paid me. And I was in the exact same financial position. So I was on this treadmill that I had created. And the only problem was every time we grew, it became a lot less fun because I wasn't doing the stuff like the on the ground stuff that I enjoyed in real estate. It was just managing all the problems and all the people issues and stuff that came up, and bigger financial issues and all that stuff. So I knew that what I'd been doing wasn't sustainable, and it was a humbling process. I had to go from being recognized as very successful to having to admit that the strategy just wasn't going to work, and it wasn't getting me closer to my ideal life. So I started over from scratch. I had no overhead. I had no team, but I had one specific focus when I started over. When I decided flipping just wasn't going to get me there, I need to start over. The focus was financial freedom. And it was more specifically around the life that financial freedom brings, because people say they want financial freedom, but they want the life that it brings. So for me, that was more time with family. It was less stress. It was more flexibility, the ability to choose more fulfilling work and ways to spend my time, like assisting veterans or providing amazing guest experiences and helping people like you and creating a podcast and a YouTube channel and helping other people get to financial freedom. Because I think it's like, it's changed my life dramatically. And I love this topic. So initially, I thought it would be long-term rentals that were the solution. I started building a portfolio of long-term rentals through the BRRRR method, which is the buy, rehab, rent, and repeat method. And it changed my financial outlook drastically. Like it worked. I built up a bunch of equity through the rehabs. I purchased 26 total units, mostly single-family homes over the next 2.5 years. So here's pictures of a handful of the houses that I owned. And I liked the long-term rentals at first, but I realized that there was still this problem of inconsistency. My houses I was rehabbing them, and then they were getting trashed by my tenants, and then not having the lifestyle I was after. So most of my long-term rentals were voucher tenants. I was working with this program that was for homeless veterans, and it was a great program. I liked working with it, but there was a lot of challenges that came with it. So it was extremely management intensive. So it took up a ton of my time. And the trade-off was the cash flow was higher. So it's very difficult for people to find an investment that's not management intensive, but it pays higher than average returns. And so around 2017, we moved from the Chicago area to Beverly Shores, Indiana, and we tried making an Airbnb in our apartment. So I'd heard about like people doing really well with Airbnb. So we were rehabbing this house anyway. So we decided to spend an extra $30,000 and rehab the basement. It was an unfinished basement. And we said, what the heck? We'll put a bathroom, a kitchen, and a bedroom down there. You can see some of the pictures here. And we threw it up on Airbnb. And in the first few months, we made $24,000, which was 3/4 of our mortgage. And I was just like totally blown away because we had moved there and didn't have any intention. Like we thought we were going to pay a $3,200 mortgage for the next 30 years. And all of a sudden we don't have a mortgage anymore. Like our housing cost was gone because, we weren't optimizing things. We only made a 3/4 of our mortgage that first summer, but we got better at it over time. And it was basically paying for our cost of housing, which if you eliminate that, that's a big cost. So we were hooked. We decided to scale this into separate properties in the nearby community. And so here's some of the properties that we bought since then. These are just, it's a working class area. And these are houses that are nothing, particularly special. But again, just using the BRRRR method, we bought them, rehabbed them, and turned them into vacation rentals. So just to recap, I started from zero. I had no idea how to run the numbers. I didn't know what market to invest in, another big question. I didn't know what financing to use for vacation rentals. I didn't know if someone was going to book my property. I didn't know how to find cleaners, what to say to guests, all the things that come up. But we just decided to jump in. So this is why I'm so excited to share this info with you that totally changed my life because, you can avoid some of the mistakes that I made along the way, that you can do this much better because I'm going to basically share what I wish I had known before I started. So from zero to this was last month in just one of our properties that we've got. So this is the one we call Big Blue. So this is the booking calendar. I just took a screenshot from Airbnb. And you can see all these green lines are people that stayed there. So it's probably kind of small for you to see on your screen, especially if you're watching this on your phone. But you can see this first night, $494 for a one night stay. Then the next week, Edward, it was $26.74 for a week, $17.66, then $1,161. So these are just back-to-back bookings that occurred. And these are numbers that like I wouldn't get. This house would rent for maybe $1,200 a month as a long-term rental. And I was getting double that in a week. I'm getting double that in a week. So July was pretty much all booked up. We had our family come in and stay. They tried to book it, but we just blocked it off for them the last week. So we didn't make over 10 grand. We would have had they not stayed with us. So that was the income on just one property that would rent for $1,200 a month long-term. So the other thing that this provided us was consistency, because that isn't just like the anomaly. It wasn't just one property. Here's 3 other properties the last couple months. And you can see, again, it's all just green with bookings. This is the historic Charmer, we call it, Cozy House. That's the Potawatomi place. So just, run of the mill, like working class neighborhood, nothing special. And then, like I mentioned, this work is pretty fulfilling too, because these are just some of the recent reviews that we got. You can see that Stephanie stayed from July 30th to August 1st. The weekend stay at the Good Farm was truly the best experience ever for our girls' trip away. The host, Taryn, was so amazing and welcoming and provided everything anyone would need. Taryn suggested some restaurants that were absolutely delicious. And she goes on from there. This one was from July 22nd to the 28th. They stayed at Potawatomi Place. The house is just as lovely as pictured, very clean and comfy. Location is close to just about everything. Our family had a great time. We would definitely stay again. Quick communication. So there's lots of these every day. They come in and every now and then it's not a 5-star review, but the vast majority are 5-star reviews and people just saying, you made our vacation, which is super fulfilling work to do. So are you ready to do the same? I'd love to just check in. If you are ready, if you could type ready in the chat so I can see I'm not just talking to myself here, and there's actually people on the other end of this. Ready, Nathan, Nathaniel, Jennifer, Eric, Courtney, Valerie. Awesome. Thank you. I'm glad that somebody out there is listening. That's great. Awesome. So one of my favorite quotes, if you've known me for a while, you probably know this, is a year from now, you will wish you had started today. So imagine what this could do in your life if you implement these tactics I'm about to teach, where you'll be a year from now. What this could do if you just had one of these properties that's super high cash flowing. How could that change how you approach things? In order to build an effective vacation rental business, we have to start from the beginning, though. So a lot of people will approach me and they'll ask me questions like, what property management software should I use? Or what type of, how do you hire your cleaners? Or all the questions that come up. There's a million questions that could come up around this, but it's really important to start from the very beginning, because you can't build a team and manage properties well without high quality properties. You can't have high quality vacation rentals without understanding how to transform it and update and furnish it. You can't update and furnish a property without buying it first. So you have to understand how to buy it. You can't buy it without knowing how to find it. You can't find it without, you can't find the right property until you understand who your ideal guest is, because you don't want to buy a property that's suited for the wrong guest. And then you can't know your ideal guest until you've identified the right market. And finally, you can't identify the right market until you know exactly what personal outcome you are targeting. Like, again, why you're getting into this in the first place, because everyone's is going to be different. So, people will search all the time, what's the best market for vacation rentals? And it's so different for different people. So you got to go all the way back to the beginning and start there. So phase 1, we're going to go through the 3 phases like I talked about. Phase 1 is around getting the right deal. So let's dive into this. Again, where can this work? This is probably one of the top questions asked or Googled. Like if you, it's one of the top Google search terms. If you search, where's the best market for AirBNB? And you'll get results today and you'll get totally different results tomorrow because, again, there's so many things that go into it. So just a little bit of background. AirBNB started in 2007. It changed everything. There's been vacation rentals forever. If, in the Bible, it talks about innkeepers. There's been short-term rentals around forever. It's something people have done. But in 2007, when Airbnb came along, all of a sudden anyone could do this, that you could open up houses that were cheaper than hotels. So it started to become a lot more mainstream. Currently, there's around 4 million hosts, and there's been 900 million guest arrivals just on Airbnb. So not including all the other platforms. The demand is massive, but inconsistency and lack of clarity prevent hosts from starting. So there's people, obviously, you if you're on this, you probably know the potential, but there's again, these questions, the inconsistency, it's hard to run the numbers. You don't know exactly what you can expect. As a result, this works as a result of this supply and demand differentiation, or differential. This works well in thousands of markets, literally thousands of markets. So just search an area you're interested on Airbnb and see how many listings come up. You can check the pricing, you can see the booking calendars, and I guarantee you there's probably going to be demand. It might not work super well in one specific town, but I guarantee within, an hour drive of there's probably many, many places that it works really well. It works in most locations. So what is a vacation rental? Because I think that term can throw people off. So this is a property in Kauai, Hawaii. I don't own this property. I wish I did. That'd be cool. It's probably a $4 million build on the island of Kauai in the islands of Hawaii. And I think this is what people envision when they think about vacation rentals or hear that term. It's like this beautiful island destination. A lot of times they don't envision this property. This is a 2-unit that I bought for $24,500 in Michigan City, Indiana. So the beautiful, Kauai, Indiana, it's kind of similar. But it's just a working class area. Here's some of the inside. So we bought it for $24,000. It obviously needed a lot of work for that price point. So we put about another $70,000 or $80,000 into it. And we made it look really nice. It's just a nice, solid 2-unit house. And so this is one of the most recent reviews that we got on this property. And as you're reading it, you'd probably think that it's more for the Kauai property. So she wrote that she just stayed there July 28th and 20 through 29th. So it was just a 1-night stay. And she wrote 5 stars, more if the system would allow me to. Please stay at Lower Dunes so you can have a great experience with your host. Amazing communication, great recommendations for places to stay and things to do, and super cute and very, very clean home. Easy check-in and check-out. Loved our experience. So this is the private note to us. Love our experience working with you. Thank you for everything. Cute place to stay, a bottle of wine and note. Awesome communication, great recommendations. If you're in St. Louis, look us up and we'll show you around. So just an awesome guest. More than 5 stars you wouldn't picture on a 2-unit in Michigan City. She paid $143 for 1 night plus a $90 cleaning fee minus the 3% that Airbnb takes from the host. So we got $226 for one of the units in the 2-unit for one of the nights that's booked, and we're booked the entire month of July. So you can do the math on that for a property that was purchased for $24,000. It wasn't the $4 million typical vacation rental that you would think of. So I just am wanting to challenge you to think outside the box on where this could be possible, what type of returns you could potentially get from property. So it begs the question then, what are the factors that make a great short-term rental or a vacation rental? And to me, there's kind of 5 buckets that you need to really think about when you're thinking about a market and thinking about a property. So the first one is affordability. So not just affordability around the purchase price, but also around the nightly rate that you can charge. And a lot of people think that there's a correlation between the two, that if I am in an expensive purchase price market, then obviously the rents are going to be high, or the nightly fees for my guests are going to be higher on Airbnb. And there's not a correlation. There's just not. There's different factors that drive those two. So understanding where you can purchase a property that's affordable and then get high rents is really important, or high nightly fees, I guess. It's not really considered rent. Seasonality. Every property is going to have different seasonality. It's not just how most people think summer and winter, high season and low season. Some places, the slow season 3 months. Some places it's an even 6 and 6. Some places don't have a slow season. In northern Wisconsin, I know people buying, and people go up there all summer long and into the fall, and they do outdoor stuff. And then in the winter, when the snow comes and just pelts them, you would think it would just shut down, but they're actually busier at their Airbnbs because there's more snowmobiles on the road than there are cars. So it's a great type of vacation rental because all year round you've got demand for people coming there for different reasons. So it's seasonality is one thing to think about. Desirability. So again, one of the big things people say is, why would somebody rent a Airbnb near me? I have this conversation, I feel like at least once a week when I talk about vacation rentals, and I like to have them close by. Like, I like to be a little more hands-on. Some people don't. It works great regardless, but people are like, well, I live in the suburbs of Chicago. No one's going to want to do this in Naperville, or no one's going to want to do this in Homewood or up in Mundelein or wherever it is that you're at. And it's just not the case. If you search, you can find that that there's going to be 300 results that come up either in your area or right around your area on Airbnb, which 300 is the max. So just to share with you why somebody would want to rent, here's examples of just guests who've come in the last couple weeks or booked in the last couple weeks. So Airbnb says once you've booked the guest, they tell you, why don't you let your host know why you're coming? So here's the notes that we've got. So I've been wanting to bring my daughters to the dunes for a couple of years. So they want to visit the beach. Here's another one. My friends from medical school are coming to visit. We want to have a little reunion. So a med school reunion. Here's one. We're excited about your beautiful home. We're coming for our daughter's official visit to Notre Dame for basketball. So a college visit. By the way, we're not in South Bend. We're like 45 minutes away. So, we didn't even expect that to be something that people would do, but people stay and go to Notre Dame for football games or visits or whatever. My sisters would love the chance to stay at your home. So sisters weekend, family vacation. We want to visit a new area. So visiting a new area. My father lives in the area and we just want a place to stay. So this is a huge one. People all the time book because you want to visit family, but you don't want to stay with your family. Maybe it's enough to just see your family, but you want to stay in a separate location nearby. So people all the time book because there's family in the area, and that's anywhere there's going to be family in the area. We're celebrating a 40th birthday party, small weekend getaway from Chicago. We're doing family pictures. This is a huge one too. We get asked all the time by photographers, can we rent your place to take pictures for an event or for whatever? We actually had a movie location. It was they worked for a producer and they scouted locations. They reached out. There's an HBO mini series that they were looking for a place on the lake. So our old place that had the basement apartment, they asked if they could rent it for a month. They were going to pay us an obscene amount of money. I forget what it was. It was multiple tens of thousands of dollars. Like, I want to say it was like $30,000 or $40,000, maybe more. They were going to move out all our furniture, use it for this filming for a month, and then move everything back in exactly how it was. So that, I guarantee you, that wasn't something we had in mind when we started doing Airbnb, but those opportunities come up. They ended up not taking our place. So we weren't on HBO, but it was a cool opportunity. It could have happened. They want to visit the zoo, do hiking, shops. Coming from Arizona for our son's wedding. This is another big one. Lots of people staying for weddings. Religious celebration, the Feast of the Tabernacle. They're here for 2 weeks. I didn't even know what Feast of the Tabernacle was, but I looked it up and apparently it's a Jewish holiday. We're in the area visiting 2 friends. So parents get away. They want to get away from the kids. Anniversary. Here's one where they're bringing in 6 guides from Minnesota to stay at our duplex and teach fourth graders on, it's the LaPorte County Soil and Water Conservation District. So they've got this whole program, this camp for like 2 weeks where they're going to teach fourth graders. So awesome to be a part of that. Didn't, expect anything like that. Aging parents care. We got 2 separate month-long stays in the off season from one guy who came in for a month at a time to take care of his aging parents. Hospital visits, casino, winery, all these reasons. So when you're stopped because you say, well, nobody would want to stay in my area, think through like how many of these things could potentially be on there. Some people just create an Instagrammable place because it's cool for pictures, and people will rent. And that's all they rent to for the most part, is people who found it on Instagram and there's cool pictures to take. And so other people who are super into Instagram pictures will rent it just for the Instagram pictures. So there's a whole niche for that. So you can kind of niche down in this and pick certain things that you kind of specialize in. The fourth thing is a legality. This is a big question that comes up. So where is this legal? So if you go to Airbnb, there's a portion of Airbnb where you can search for different cities. So a city that you want to buy in, and it will link you to the current rules. So about 80% of the US either has a rule that you're allowed to do this and there's no restriction, or they haven't made a rule at all. So it's the other 20% that have made rules. All the big cities have rules, and most have some level of restriction, even though it's not massive in most areas. There's some cities where it is difficult, but people are still doing it there. So understanding the legality aspect. And then by far, the biggest factor is you. So this is the main one that people overlook, and it's the biggest one, because people think, well, I'm just going to buy in the place that's going to make me the most money. But what's your goal? Like, why are you getting into this? What lifestyle do you want? Do you want to use this? Do you want to have like a free vacation place to go to that you can use it with your family? Or is that not important to you? What's your financial situation? Because that's going to dictate what type of financing you use, which is going to dictate what type of property you buy. What's your tax situation? Because some are going to help you when it comes to your tax strategy. Some are probably going to hurt you. So buying the right type of property, the right cost category. And then what's your management style? Like, do you want to be super hands-on? Do you not want to be? So understanding yourself is going to be the biggest factor that dictates where you invest and what type of property you invest in. Here's a chart that shows how many nights it would take for the average nightly Airbnb rate versus the average cost of a property. So how many nights it would take to cover the average cost of a property in that area. So this is just averages. So if you were somehow to be better than the average in terms of your listing and the price point, and then you were better than the average in terms of buying a great deal that wasn't just the average, then it could obviously beat this average. But if you're to buy in Akron, Ohio, it's going to take you 4.2. If you were just average, it would take you 4.2 nights of bookings to cover your entire mortgage. So if you just left your house once a month and rented it out for a long weekend, you basically would live for free in Akron, Ohio. On the flip side, in San Jose, it's going to take you 27.29 months or 27.29 nights to cover your monthly rent. So again, like I mentioned, there's not a direct correlation between rent price and purchase price. So the key is to figure out where this works, where the highest rents or the highest nightly rate is compared to the most affordable market. So we'll come back to this a little later. So this is how you run the numbers on to understand if it's going to be a good investment for a short-term rental. And it's pretty simple. And I'll go through an example of this in a second. But you want to get the average nightly rent. So if you're obviously seasonality is going to play into this. So if you're in an area where, you've got the exact same low season and high season, then figure out what the average is for both and then combine them. And that'll give you the average nightly rent. If your high season's 9 months long, your low season's, 3 months long, then obviously figure out what the average is for 3/4 of the time and then 1/4 of the time and combine them. So figure out what that average nightly rent is. percentage of occupancy. So how many nights can you get it booked up? And we'll talk about how to do that in a second. And then multiply it by 365, the number of obviously nights in the year. And then subtract out your expenses. So it's a little bit different than a long-term rental. So you're going to have your mortgage most likely, unless you own it with cash, which is PITI, that's principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So that's your whole mortgage that you pay. Typically, a mortgage company is going to require you to, escrow your insurance and taxes. So that's your whole mortgage. The utilities, you're going to pay the utilities because you don't have a tenant in there. So you're going to be responsible for that. Lawn and snow removal, same way. Maybe your tenant pays for long-term rentals, but you're going to have to pay for that. Cleanings, so you're going to have to pay someone to clean or clean it yourself. So you want to account for that expense. Consumables, that's all the cleaning supplies. That's, the gift or bottle of wine that you leave for your tenant or for your guest. Anything that you're going to eventually run out of, and then maintenance costs. So let's look at an example of just like a average property and I hate to say average because there's so many factors that go into it. And there's not just like an average, like different markets are going to demand different things, but this, I think you'll commonly see these price points and these types of numbers in like just a very affordable market. So average nightly rent is $140. The percentage of occupancy is 75%. So the national average, they say, is 50% for occupancy. So that takes into account, just terrible areas or people who just have no clue what they're doing. And then also the best of the best who have optimized this really, really well. So I think 75 is a good place to be if you've put some thought into it and you've figured out how to optimize a few things. So this means that your total gross income would be $39,694. And also in the average nightly rent, I've included cleaning fee. So this is a pretty low average nightly rent, a pretty affordable area because you're adding in the cleaning fee and dividing it by the stay. And that's typically how it's calculated because you've got cleaning fee is part of that. So then you've got expenses. So on the other side, a typical mortgage on a say $200,000 to $250,000 property is probably going to be $1,000 a month. If you live in Chicago, like a lot of people on this, then it's probably $2,000 because the taxes account for $1,000 of that per month. But your utilities are $250, lawn and snow $120, cleaning $600. So all of it together is $26,000 annually. So this is I'm putting it on here monthly and then multiplying it by 12. So annually it's $26,000. So that means that you're making $13,500 per year or $1,128 per month. So obviously, and that's net. So that's like what you would compare to your net cash flow on a long-term rental. There's not a lot of really affordable long-term rentals out there that I've seen that give you a net take home of $1,128 per month. And, this isn't all of them. Like I said, not all of them are going to give you that. Some it might be $700. Some it might be $2,000. I've seen people make multiple thousands of dollars per month on one property. I'm currently doing that on one of ours. So it's possible. So before we get into phase two, let me just go through real quick because you're probably like, okay, I understand how to run the numbers, but where do I look to get these numbers? How do I figure out the occupancy rate and that sort of thing? So just real quick before we jump into that, let me. Oh, no, not that. I almost ended the whole thing here. I just want to get out of, okay, so let me get out of the slideshow. And instead, I'm going to share a website real quick. Stop share and reshare. All right. Is everyone with me so far? Am I losing anyone? Again, if there's questions, feel free to put those in the box. Yes, I'm seeing some yeses. Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to share a website called Google. No, it's not Google. It's AirDNA. So you've probably heard of AirDNA. It's one of the biggest data companies around Airbnbs. So it collects a whole bunch of data. So if you go here, they'll charge you for a premium account. You don't need a premium account, but let's just say, I'm going to go back real quick to the chart I showed earlier and figure out like a very affordable market where, so I'm looking at it. So Greensboro, North Carolina, is 5.59 nights per month would need to be rented to cover the entire mortgage on an average property. So it's it should be a solid market, right? So let's just search Greensboro just to get an idea of what AirDNA says. So what you're going to get is sort of like the Zestimate for Airbnb. So it's not, computers are never going to be able to replace, or the AI isn't going to be able to replace the super narrowed down data that you want to get to, but it gives you just if you're just looking at locations, it gives you an idea of what to expect. So the average daily rate is 127 there. The average occupancy is 69, and the average monthly revenue is 1697. So this is, again, average, which I don't think we should ever shoot for average. If you're shooting for average, then, you can do average easy. You should shoot for doing much better than average. So now we take that data. We know what AirDNA says, and we go to Airbnb, and we can search for Greensboro and just see what comes up. Let's look at some comps. I'm not searching for anything particular. So under type of place, I would recommend searching for entire place, because you're not going to rent like a room. You're going to be renting an entire place. And then let's just narrow it down to 3 bedrooms, because that's like very common. Instead of showing, 1,000 places, it shows 249 3 bedrooms in Greensboro. So you can start to go through and see what people are charging for. And the average nightly rate was for every size property. And so Airbnb doesn't show you, a lot of times it will show you the lower side of the nightly rate. If you don't search for days, specific days, it's going to show you like the cheaper days, because it wants you to click on it and it wants you to look for specific days then, and those will be much higher. But you can start to look through and see, here's one that's 150 a night, charming 3-bed, 2-bath. It has no review, so that's brand new. 75, 225. It's got a pool. So maybe a pool is something that you want. There's 109 reviews there. Hot tub, 101. It's got all 5-star reviews, 4.8 here, reviews, comfortable home. So you can start to get an idea of, there's properties renting that are just like standard properties that aren't like crazy nice, a friendly bungalow, 149 a night for, it's got 109 reviews and 4.8 stars. So that means this house doesn't go much below 149. So it's probably actually higher than that. And so then we can go to realtor.com for all the people who say that there's just no deals out there. You can't ever find a deal. Comes up with Valpo where I live. But if we just search Greensboro, probably nothing's going to come up, because there's just stuff does come up. So if you look, then you can see there's an average house here for 197.5 that looks similar to the houses that were on there. Now, probably needs some work. There's another house here for 70,000. It needs some work, but it's kind of a cute house. Like, you take some cool pictures of that. It's already got a new roof. You can see it's a brick house. So exterior wise doesn't need a whole lot. 4 bedrooms. So it's going to sleep at least 8 people. You can probably put a pull-out couch and sleep 10 people in this house. It's got 2 bathrooms for $70,000, new on the market. So if you were to buy this for $70,000, let's just see what the pictures look like. Looks like a decent house. And, say you had to put 50,000 into it. You got a house for 125 and it rents for, say on average 120 to 180 probably, when you're looking across here. These are just like broad brush, just took me a few minutes to look. And if you do the calculations on that, your mortgage on that house is probably going to be maybe $800 a month. And so if they're renting for this and you get 75% occupancy, you're probably going to be around that number that we just talked about, like $40,000 in income. So, so it's not like this is, you have to find, like if you're a wholesaler, you've got to find deals at massive discounts because you've got to wholesale it to a rehabber who's still got to make a spread on it. You can buy stuff off of realtor.com like we just looked at, and it still makes incredible sense from a financial standpoint. And that's just like 5 minutes of searching. So you can obviously find stuff better than that if you're willing to look a little bit harder. So let me stop the share there, go back to the slides and cover step 2 and step 3. Hopefully this is resonating with people and making sense. All right, here's the slideshow. So I think we're about halfway done at this point. Yeah. All right, so phase 2. So phase 2 is transforming the property into I don't think I actually shared it. All right, hold on one second. All right, now I think it's shared. Technical difficulties. All right, let me bring up the chat just in case. Yeah, there's a question. Yes. Okay, you can see it. Cool. All right. So, all right. So the phase 2 is transforming the property into a vacation rental. There's almost, I don't think there's any property out there that doesn't need some level of make ready for a vacation rental. So you can see this property on the left, or this is the same house on the left and on the right. So on the left, this is right after we got done rehabbing the house. We bought this house for $39,000. And you can see my assistant there helping us with the with the furnishings. So my wife and I were over there getting the house ready. And then, a week later, it looked like this because there's just certain aspects that you do from the time you purchase it to the time you list it. And there's a whole process around that. So let's go through that process of converting it from just an average house into a really high quality, high cash flowing vacation rental. And it doesn't have to be something super special. So this is, so the way I approach this again is starting with the end in mind. What is the outcome that I'm after? Because if you start taking actions and you're not specifically super clear, especially if you bring in contractors, it gets ugly super fast. I know from lots of experience of it getting real ugly. So now I always start with the end in mind. So what is an ideal vacation rental based on the comp? So we're going to start with this last step. So the question I get all the time is, what should I put into this property? Should I put quartz countertops? Is it worth it? Should I put a hot tub into this property? And I always say, you have the exact answer right in front of you. Just pull up AirBNB, just like I just did. Look at the comps that are the ideal property. Don't look at the ones that got 3 bookings last year. Look at the ones that are rated 5 stars, commanding the highest rents, and just getting booked up like crazy. Mimic those. Hand that to your contractor and say, make me this. So you come up with the ideal outcome and you have a clear, specific picture and all the attributes that you need to have in that vacation rental before you even start. Then working your way backwards. So now the inventory checklist. So this is something that you're going to need before you get to the final outcome and list it. All the stuff that's going to go in your supply closet. So you need to have a system around that, a checklist, so that it's the exact same stuff that's in there all the time. And have it so that you can, when your cleaners are there, they can check and see what are we low on, and you've got it under control. Then the furnishing checklist is the next step. So before you get to the inventory of your consumables, now you've got to make sure it's furnished correctly. And so we've got a furnishing checklist that I'm going to give to everyone who's on this call. It's a working spreadsheet, but it goes room by room and it has exactly what we put in every property. And it's evolved over time. And there's even customized stuff for us that we put in there. But I'll share that link with you if you're on this webinar, and you can use that then in your next one. And it just saves so much time when we're getting done with the rehab of a property. We just go out there and we know exactly what to buy. Then the QC checklist. This is like 9 pages of checking all the things that the contractor did that we overlook a lot of times. So, oh, and by the way, the link to the furnishing checklist will be in the comments or in the chat box. I think Heather, who's amazing, who does pretty much takes care of me and is awesome. She's my executive assistant. She's posting it in the chat box there. And then, so the QC checklist is after the rehab is done. It's all the things that you wouldn't remember to check. There's always punch list stuff that the contractor forgets. And so it's 9 pages of all the painful things that we forgot about, like, does every single window open? Does every single window lock? Have you checked every drawer? Have you all the things that a house looks great, it looks rehab, but then as soon as a guest rents it, you've got all these problems. So going through that and having a system around it. Then vision sharing with your contractor. So I did a video on YouTube around how I hire contractors and how I set that relationship up. So again, Heather's going to post a link to that video, but you can go on the Living Off Rentals YouTube channel and you can watch that, as opposed to me going through the whole process of how I hire contractors on this call, since that's not the point of it. But there's a process around that and coming up with or creating a successful relationship. And then lastly, the scope of work development. So creating the picture. So taking the ideal vacation rental based on the comps and turning that into language that the contractor can understand up front. So again, I did a video on how to create a scope of work, and I also linked the scope of work. I gave you a template for that in the video. So if you want to see that, you can watch that video as well. So we'll have the link to that as well. And so once you're all done with transforming this house into a beautiful vacation rental, the biggest concern that most people have, because they watch the mainstream news that likes to pull out these stories that get people real worried. Won't guests destroy my house with big parties? Because that's all you hear about. There's been 900 million stays on Airbnbs, but the ones you hear about are the ones where there's a big party. And so this is not common. I have friends that own Airbnbs, and we've talked about this, and there's kind of a consensus that we have that it's about 1 out of 100 guests that are a big problem. That I've never had a party. I've never had my properties trashed. I've had hundreds of stays. But there's 99% of the guests are going to be on a spectrum from like the friendliest people in the world that you want to get to know and become friends with, to people that, just aren't very communicative and, just not super friendly. But the vast majority are just super respectful of the house. They come in, they stay there, and they leave. You'll have like 1% that come in and do something stupid. We had somebody stay. It was a one-night stay. She had positive previous reviews, but her and her friend smoked weed in the house the whole night. Got there the next day to clean it. The cleaners showed up, and the cleaners said they felt high because there was so much weed smell in the air. And we had somebody checking in that afternoon. So it caused a problem. But we tried to air it out, and then we set expectations for the next person, saying, hey, sorry, we had disrespectful guests. We've done everything we can to air it out. And they were pretty understanding, but stuff like that happens very rarely. So that's transforming the property. Hopefully some of those checklists and videos will help with that. Now, the last phase, and I know, we're getting short on time, so I'll try to go quickly through this last phase, but it's automating the cash flow and the guest experience. So once you now have a great vacation rental, how does that transform into continuous high cash flow over and over without you losing your sanity? So this is Daniel Rustine, and he wrote this book, Optimize Your B&B. It's one of the most popular books on Airbnb. He used to work there. He lives in Airbnbs full time. He was just recently on the podcast, and I read this book a couple of years ago. It's a great book, but he said something on the podcast. It's not about having a listing that's being seen the most. It's about converting the most people who see the listing. So it's important to recognize that Airbnb is a business, and they get paid every time somebody books, and they get paid a lot more actually by the person who books than by you, the host. So they're going to promote in their searches the properties that convert the most, not necessarily the ones that are seen the most, because if people are seeing it and just not booking it, they're not getting paid. So they will promote the ones that actually are converting the people who land on that listing. So I would recommend reading his book. It's a great book, Optimize Your B&B. There's a lot of tweaks that you can do to improve your listing so that it is converted better. But the biggest dictator of conversions is your guest rating. That is what the bread and butter of this entire business is when you're on Airbnb. Once you're at scale and you're getting direct bookings, it can evolve and change a little bit. But just like Amazon, I know when you go to Amazon, you're probably just like me. The first thing you look at is the review. There can be a 5-star thing that costs twice as much as the item that looks exactly the same, but ranked 4 stars. And you're going to buy the 5-star item because it's been tested. Other people love it. So that is exactly how Airbnb works. People are going to look at the star rating before, and they'll pay more for something that has a high star rating as opposed to the cheaper one that has the low star rating. So how do you ensure that you get 5 stars? Because that's what it's all about. So here's the components of a 5-star review. You've got communication, you've got cleanliness, you've got furnishings, you've got curb appeal, you've got guidebook, you've got check-in process, amenities, photos, personalization, neighbors, and listing info. So there's all these different buckets that some are competing with each other, some are complementing each other. So it begs the question then, how do you manage all this stuff? It seems like a lot to manage a property. There's all these different things. Each one of these can have a system around it, and it's very manageable, can all tie into a larger system. So what I've done is, what I've recognized over time is that the key to this whole thing is setting, managing, and exceeding guest expectations. If we go back to the example of the Kauai $4 million property, you would think that the review that was on there that said 6 out of 5 stars, if I could, would be for that property. But it was for my little 2-bedroom or 2-unit property in Michigan City, because the expectations were set right. She wasn't expecting to show up to this luxury vacation rental. She was expecting to stay in an affordable, nice place, clean, but we went above and beyond that, those minimum expectations, which isn't that hard because the competition isn't crazy high on Airbnb. So I basically have divided all the different components of managing an Airbnb and getting 5-star reviews into these 2 different buckets. So the first bucket is setting and exceeding the controllable. So it's all the controllable things. You want to set expectations around these and then just do a little bit better in each one of these. And then the uncontrollable, which is going to be I shouldn't say a lot, but there's going to be a handful of uncontrollable. These are things that you want to set and manage expectations around. So letting people know in advance, or managing once these things do occur that you can't control, how you react is just as important as the thing itself, right? So how do you do that when you've got all these different things and you've got guests checking in and checking out? Today we had guests checking in, checking out. I wasn't involved in the process pretty much at all. So there's 2 key team members that I would suggest everyone who gets into Airbnbs have, and to set expectations with these 2 people right from the start and around what they're responsible for, what you're responsible for. But it's amazing what they can do. And so this is how there's companies, big companies that manage all Airbnbs all across the US, and they don't have employees on the ground, but they've got these team members on the ground. And so I'm a big advocate for managing properties yourself, because you can do the exact same thing. So what a cleaner can do, they clean between guests, they do the laundry. So typically we have guests check out at 10, new guests check in at 4 on almost all of our properties. That's typical. They do 4 loads of laundry between guests, typically, all the sheets and towels. So managing that process and understanding what type of laundry machine to buy, inventorying, writing notes, leaving guests gifts, supply restocking, small repairs, periodic deep cleanings. Twice a year, we have the house totally deep clean, where they get the blinds, move furniture, clean it beyond just the typical cleaning. And then it's a second set of eyes, so you don't have to be there. My properties are in Michigan City, which is a half hour away, but I've set it up to where I don't really need to go there at all. They could be in Florida, and I'd run it pretty much the exact same. The second person is key. They are sort of a utility player. It's your handyman, so they're good at a lot. And typically you pay them by the hour, and they'll do the initial make-ready repairs sometimes. Sometimes you'll have a separate contractor if you're doing a gut rehab. They do the initial furnishing, restocking in some cases, that sometimes the cleaner won't do the restocking. So they do it. Routine maintenance, Wi-Fi issues. This is huge. Everyone who shows up, who stays at your place, is going to bring 5 phones and 3 tablets. And, you're probably going to have smart devices that run off Wi-Fi. Everything hinges on Wi-Fi. Your guest wants Wi-Fi. So thinking through that and having a system in place to manage the Wi-Fi if there's an outage, because, routers can go down or whatever. Landscaping and snow removal. So we used to have a separate landscaping and snow removal company. Now our handyman does it, because he's pretty much full-time now. So it's just one more thing we can pay him for hourly. And he's a third set of eyes now. So now you've got redundancy built in to check for things that your guest might notice, so that you don't have to be there and people can watch out for you. Your team members can. So we go back to then that list of all the things that are controllable, all the things that are uncontrollable. And these 2 team members can handle all the highlighted items on here, to a degree. Obviously, there's some things that they can't necessarily change, but they could, like when you look at the uncontrollable, they can walk next door and meet the neighbors and, create a good relationship with them if there's neighbor problems, or emergency maintenance they're going to respond to. Furnishings, they can set up the furnishings for you and maintain those. So all these things that before, when we started, we didn't have a handyman or cleaner. My wife cleaned our basement unit because she was there, and we just did it. But as you start to evolve and figure out, that's not necessarily the best use of my time, then, you start to realize that there's, you can get team members who are affordable, and they're just rock stars and can really help you continue to grow your business so you can grow together. All right. And then finally, these are the things that I say, don't worry about yet. Again, I get questions all the time around what's like a guest relations VA. That person, I highly recommend you get eventually, because they will take off all the things that aren't highlighted. Our guest relations person does for us now, because once we had a handful of properties, it made sense. We had economies of scale enough to pay that person. So now there's nothing that's not highlighted on here that a team member does on our behalf, but it kind of grew over time. I wouldn't recommend doing that right from the start. Manage the guests yourself. It's not that difficult. Property management software, don't worry about it yet. Direct booking site, pricing optimization, third-party guest messaging tools. These are all things that are fancy, shiny objects that are just distractions. Just go out and buy your first property, put it on AirBNB, use the tools that AirBNB integrates with the platform, because now they every time somebody comes up with a third-party tool, Airbnb just steals it and puts it in their own platform. So they have such great tools that you can manage it right there. All we ever did in the beginning for the first couple of years was just list it on Airbnb and got plenty of bookings just from that site. So you don't need 15 different platforms. So are you ready to get started with your own? That's the question. Here's an example of somebody who was just on my podcast recently, Blake Daly. He was on episode number 75. So if you want to search for that on the Living Off Rentals podcast, you can hear his story. But he graduated from the Air Force Academy in 2019. So 2 years ago, he graduated. He went to his first station where he was stationed down near Panama City. They bought a 2-unit because he was like, I want to buy something that I can rent the other part of this. And that ended up, he and his wife rehabbed it, fixed it up, and that paid for his entire mortgage plus some. So now he's making money. He has no cost of living, plus he's making money on the house that he lives in a nice place in Panama City. Then he did it one more time with another 2-unit, and now he was living for free and making more than his Air Force pay as an Air Force officer. So within less than 2 years of graduating from college, he's making more than he was in his full-time W-2 job as a officer in the Air Force. He did it 2 more times, so a total of 4, and now he's buying small commercial properties and converting those into Airbnb. So the potential is just amazing on what you can do. I mean, a 25-year-old guy 2 years out of college is basically financially free from 2 properties. So these aren't just one-off examples. Blake isn't like, just a unicorn. This is the strategy that I've used to create financial freedom. It's the one that others have used the exact same way. So if you're sitting there saying, this sounds awesome, how do I start? In my opinion, you have 2 options. So you can take the info I've shared with you this afternoon. You can start, you can get started, because I think I tried to put as much content in there as possible to where it can get you to the next level. I obviously cannot put every single detail and answer every question you're ever going to have, but hopefully some things have shifted in your mind to where you can at least get started, and you can do this yourself. This is what I did. The problem is it cost me about tens of thousands of dollars in lost income and opportunity, because I think back to the pricing model that we had in our basement apartment. And I'm like, yeah, we made $24,000, which we were like, this is amazing in just a few months. But I'm like, we could have probably made 30 to 40,000 easy. So it cost me tens of thousands of dollars just in not understanding pricing and allowing people to book one night on a weekend so that other nights weren't booking up, and not having minimum nightly stays, and figuring out how to fill in the orphan days between the bookings, and all the different strategies that go into optimizing your listing so that you make the absolute most money possible on your listing. And so it ended up costing me tens of thousands. I figured it out. Obviously you still get there, but the other option is you can work with me directly, and I'll walk you through the exact steps to get your first high cash flowing vacation rental and avoid the biggest pitfalls. So I created recently this program that's called the First Vacation Rental Investment Blueprint. It's something I'm super passionate about. It's specifically designed for people dependent on their day job. It takes someone from having no passive income to finding, buying, and setting up their first high cash flowing vacation rental, so that they can use this first one as a template and just replicate it as many times as they want to get to that financial freedom number. So if your number is 8,000 and you can make $1,000 on a property, then you just do the exact same process that we'll go through and get you your first one. You do that 8 times and you're financially free. So it walks you through step by step, and I don't leave anything out. There's no missing steps or anything like that. My goal, again, figuring out the outcome before you start, is that everyone who comes into this program gets a high cash flowing vacation rental. We go through the steps that get there. So why do I feel like there's a need for this? I think it's, I've looked at so many short-term rental courses that are out there. There's a lot of them out there. And instead of specifically identifying the exact outcome they're going to provide, like we talked about, they overcompensate with information overload. So they say, here's everything you could possibly know. There's 100 modules, but there's no step-by-step process. Nobody walks alongside you and make sure that all your questions are answered. It's just like, buy this thing. It seems like a great way to make money for people, to create a course around this where it just is a whole bunch of information and they're not responsible for any results. So the way I've set this up, the way this program is designed, is specifically around the 3 phases that I talked about. And I kind of modeled it after building a house. So if you think about it, if you were to hire somebody to build a house and they showed up day one with the trim and the appliances and the countertop, you'd probably be like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you got to dig the hole and build the foundation first. You can't put in the appliances before you have a foundation and built the rest of the house. But people do this all the time. If you think about it in other areas, like it seems silly when you're building a house, but all the time in other areas, people will be so focused on the property management component before they've even figured out why they want to even buy a property in the first place, what the outcome is that they're after, where they're going to buy it. So each week builds on itself. So we start at the foundation, with the foundation, building the foundation, clarifying the perfect outcome, narrowing down to the ideal market that makes sense for you based on your outcomes, and then getting a great deal in a hot market. And there's lots of tools that go along with this. There's templates, there's checklists. I mentioned a few throughout this webinar. Phase 2 is the framing component. That's typically what's next on a house after the foundation is built. That's transforming the house into a high quality vacation rental. And then finally, phase 3 is week 5 and 6. And that's creating a vacation rental that really pops, or a vacation rental listing that really pops, how that all works on Airbnb, how to optimize it, and then maximizing your cash flow. So this is the program. It's going to be delivered live by me on a weekly basis. There'll be a live Q&A session each week as well. I'm going to be, walking basically side by side with you to get your first vacation rental. So who is this for? If you're asking, is this for you? If you're dependent on a W-2 job, but you want to have financial independence and the ability to work because you want to work, then I would say this is for you. If you're ready to take action and implement the information, because a lot of times you can hear information, not implement it. This is going to require you to implement the information, and you're ready to invest in your long-term growth and not looking for a get-rich-quick scheme. So we talked about that at the beginning. There's work involved. That's just the way it is. So if this sounds like you, I'm inviting you to hop on a call with me and see if it's a good fit. I've set aside time on my calendar so you can book a 45-minute session with me, and we can really get into your goals and understand if this is a good bridge from where you're at now to where you want to go. I don't want people in this program if it's not a good fit. It doesn't do me any good. It doesn't do them any good. So I really want to understand your goals and make sure that this is a good fit before I could just say, here, sign up at this link if you think it's a good fit. I want to have a conversation with everyone who's interested and just go in. So if you're interested, you're not sure if it's a good fit, we can talk through that. So book a call on my calendar and we can talk through if it makes sense for you. This is just a review that I threw in here too, because I just got this yesterday. Sound machines were much appreciated. The train did not bother my husband and I, but it did bother some of the family members. So this is a 2-unit right on train tracks. Again, we set the expectation up front in the listing that it was going to be on train tracks, and people were, she knew that going in, so she was still okay with it. And it was so close to the beach. We really appreciated the beach toys. The beds are very comfortable. The space was perfect for a family. And she says it's going to be really hard to top or find an Airbnb with accommodations like this in the future. So I just thought it was, you get these types of reviews and it just kind of makes your day. And these are pretty much every single day once you have multiple properties. So again, going back to my initial question, where do you want to be a year from now? How are you going to get to that place? Maybe this makes sense for you. Maybe you heard this and it doesn't. But if it does make sense for you and you want to move on to the next step with me and work personally with me on getting your first vacation rental, then book a call. It's going to be a very small group. It's obviously there's a lot of personal support and coaching that's going to happen with this, because it's going to be all delivered live and live Q&A. So it's not scalable beyond a certain point. So we're going to keep the group pretty small. So if you're interested, I'd encourage you to book that call. So, that was a lot, and that went way over an hour. I don't even know what time it is, but let me take some questions as people are booking. And if you booked a call, go ahead and write in the chat that you booked it, because I'd love to see who's booking a call with me. Will this be recorded? Awesome. Booked a call. Sweet. Looking forward to talking to you, Adam. Yeah, it will be recorded. It was recorded, hopefully. No, I think it's recorded. And I'll be sending out the recording tomorrow. Should be tomorrow morning. You should get it. So, how do banks assess Airbnb income for refinance? Are there longer seasoning periods? That's a great question. So it is very bank by bank. Some banks, I just had a conversation with one recently that has no restrictions around Airbnb income. Basically, they do a market rent assessment if you're a short-term rental, because the big problem is banks want to see leases a lot of times when you refinance a property. And so more and more banks are saying, obviously, short-term rentals provide really great income. We're missing out by not financing short-term rentals. It's kind of crazy not to. So they just do a market assessment saying, okay, if short-term rentals went away, what will this property rent for on a long-term basis? And if those numbers make sense, then they'll refinance the property. And a lot of them are doing 30-year asset-based loans. So in the program, we go through different lenders for different scenarios. So once you've established your goals, there's different profiles that will come up with 4 different types of investors. And based on your profile, I will recommend, okay, use this type of financing. Here's some lenders that you can work with if your profile aligns with that. So you're going to want to find lenders to refinance after you rehab a property that will kind of overlook the fact that you don't have a lease because it's not a long-term rental. Cool. In the process of booking a call now. Awesome. Dan booked. Awesome. Jennifer, okay. So the question is around the program. So I just got back. Is this a small group mentoring or just one call? Sorry, I missed what you said. This is a complete program to take you from not having a vacation rental. I mean, basically starting from scratch to having your first high cash flowing vacation rental set up and optimized. And so I'm going to teach that over a 6-week period. Not everyone will own a high cash flowing vacation rental by the end of 6 weeks necessarily. Each one of those sessions will be recorded so you can continue to rewatch. And then there'll be Q&A sessions weekly live with me. So I'll give you a calculator where you can analyze properties, put it into this spreadsheet. You can bring it and say, okay, I've got questions around this. I'm looking in this market. And we can look through it together, and you can learn from each other because everyone's going to be looking for the same thing. And you can kind of, we'll go through some of the same questions on these Q&A calls. The Q&A calls go indefinitely. I'm going to continue to do those. Eventually, maybe the content will be recorded down the road. Right now, it's going to be live. But I'm going to continue to do the Q&A calls, and you can you have access forever. So that's never going to go away. And my intent is that everybody has a really high quality vacation rental by the time they're done. So, are you only looking for distressed properties to buy and rehab, or will this work for properties that do not need a lot of rehab? So the listed price may be higher in that scenario. Maria, that's a great question. I recommend for people. So I've done over 100 rehabs and lots of flips. I've got a team that rehabs all my properties for me. I finally landed on a good team and a system around getting a good contractor. So we'll go through that system, but I recommend for people's first one, this works really well, regardless of whether you're doing a gut rehab and creating, like, finding the cheapest property you possibly can and doing the BRRRR model. One of the last properties I bought was 3 properties ago. It was turnkey. And I always said, I'll never buy a turnkey property because I just want to rehab them and build in equity. this was ready to go. And when I did the numbers, I calculated the numbers between how long it would take me and lost AirBNB revenue compared to the equity that I would build with the rehab. I realized it doesn't make sense to do a rehab. It makes sense to just buy this property, which I was still getting for a decent deal. There's a little bit of equity in it, but the cash flow was so good. It was a $107,000 property that just has killed it on Airbnb. And I bought it off the MLS just in January of this year. So, so you don't necessarily have to do a massive rehab. We are booking right now. Awesome, Carol. Be good to talk to you. Thanks. That's my goal, to do the BRRRR model, but don't want to lose an opportunity. Awesome. What will be the time between the phases? Closing takes time, and I'm curious if the phases have breaks to ensure information when needed. Yes. So it's a good question. Eventually down the road, like I said, it'll probably be a recorded session so you can kind of watch them at your own pace. I wanted to make them back to back because, in back-to-back weeks, because I want to encourage you to take action. So the information is going to be delivered on Thursdays. The Q&A is going to be live on Mondays. So it gives people the weekend. After each session, there's going to be homework. There's going to be tools you can use, but you can go out and take action and you figure out what your questions are and come back, and then we can answer the questions. But week to week, I'm going to encourage you to take pretty massive action to get to the next step. And the program's designed to build on itself, and it's not designed to give you everything that you could ever possibly wonder about Airbnbs. It's designed to give you enough to get to that next step so that you can, once you're done with this, I don't expect your education to stop, but at least you'll have a high cash flowing property that's going to pay you while you learn. A lot of people are in this bucket of, I want to learn every detail for the next year and then I'll start implementing. And it's like, well, why not get paid right up front? Get a property. I'll walk you through the process. Get a property that's going to pay you while you continue to further your education at the same time. So that's the intent behind the way I've set this up. Do you make sure? Yes, this is a great question. So Jennifer, again, so when evaluating numbers, do you make sure the numbers can work for a market renter? So like a long-term rental in case the short-term rent falls through? Absolutely. I do for me. That being said, I don't believe that the only good short-term rentals out there are the ones that will work as long-term rentals. Every person is going to have a different risk profile based on their financial status, based on the outcomes they want, based on their ability to absorb, I guess, if short-term rentals didn't work and they had to rent it on a long-term basis. Some people, they might be okay with a $500 deficit per month on that property based on the very specific financial information they're going to go through or the goals that they're going to create right up front. Others might not be in that category. I'm not comfortable with that. I'm getting there more because now I have a base of short-term rentals that can work really well as long-term rentals. So now I know if they turn into long-term rentals, now I've still got cash flow, and those could support potentially a higher end property that has much more appreciation potential and higher cash flow when it is a short-term rental. But if that turned into a long-term rental, it would probably have some losses, but I have the financial wherewithal to support those. So now I'm more comfortable going into those markets. So if that makes sense, we're going to go through your particular profile and understand what the outcome is that you want. And then based on that, you will be able to decide, what type of property makes the most sense. So, do you provide continuing support after the initial property? That's a great question. So there's also a closed Facebook group that's going to go along with this. So in addition to the Q&As that I will support you for as long as you need, I'm going to be doing the Q&As weekly. There's a closed Facebook group, and that's going to continue to grow the more people enter. So there's going to be a first cohort that goes through for the first 6 weeks. Those will be the only people in that closed Facebook group. And then beyond that, there's going to be at a higher price point in the future. I will open it up and there'll be recordings of the content. I'll still continue to do the Q&A. Everyone will continue to go into the Facebook group. So there'll be support from each other over time, because 2 years from now, there'll be someone who joined who has 10 vacation rentals, and they'll talk about things that they learned. There'll be support from me every day. I'll be in the Facebook group, and then weekly, I'll be on the Q&A calls answering questions as well. So hopefully that makes sense. I don't know what that means. All right. Oh yeah, somebody mentioned portable ozone machines do wonders. Yeah, that's what we tried that after the weed smoker. It didn't quite get rid of everything, but it definitely helped. Getting it. Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. Awesome. Okay. So I think I got most of the questions. There's a lot of comments in here, but I think I got most of the question. What criteria? Okay, here's another one. What criteria should you look for when purchasing a property for short term? So this is a big question. You can go back to the slides. I'll send you the replay tomorrow. But if you look at all the factors, so I went through buckets that I put all the different factors into that make a high quality short-term rental. There's ones that around location, and then there's ones around the specific property itself. And so look at those. You can figure out the controllable ones, the ones that aren't controllable. Those are the two different categories that they fall in. And you can see that you can figure out what would make the most sense in your market. It's going to be market dependent as well, because there might be a market like right now. We just bought 45 acres. We live on a farmhouse. On the 45 acres, we're going to have experiential rentals here, like tiny houses or small cabins or glamping tents, and that's going to be a different target renter. It'll be someone probably wanting to get out of the city, experience nature. There's a lot of those people, but it's different than somebody who's traveling here because they are here for Thanksgiving and they don't want to stay with their family. They have different desires, different outcomes. So, the property is going to be very dependent on who your ideal renter or your ideal guest is, and we will get into that in the program as well. But I mentioned that in the slideshow here. All right. Yeah. So here's a good question from Eric. What things do you put in the titles of your listings? Do you make it a point to have a nickname for all the properties? We do, just something that's kind of catchy. The thing is, so you have a very limited space for the title of your Airbnb. And so you don't want to waste that. A lot of people will write 3-bedroom, 2-bath, cool house. And it's like, yeah, as soon as you look down, you're going to see how many it sleeps and how many bedrooms it is. That's on the next line. So why'd you just waste that? What you want to do is put the most amazing part of that property. So for some people, it's going to be, I'm 2 minutes from the entrance of the Smoky Mountain National Park, or a hot tub. One of ours has a hot tub. So hot tub property, because all winter we know that a lot of people will just book a place because it has a hot tub. So we do have a little name for it, like, historic charmer, to kind of let people know it's a historic house. And then we'll say like 5 minutes to the beach, 1 block to the casino. And, it's got a, parking if you don't have parking, or it's got like, so, or it's got if parking is a problem in your area and yours has parking, you put that in there, stuff like that. So whatever stands out the most that is an advantage, you're going to highlight that there. Okay. Thanks, Carol. She said, worked with Kirby in the past, and look forward to working with this company again. Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to you. Should we stick to landlord-friendly states, or doesn't matter for short-term rentals? That's a great question as well. So technically, they are not tenants. In most states, it's a 30-day period that makes them a tenant or a squatter, I guess, if they're not leaving. So I'm always super skeptical if somebody's going to book longer than 30 days or right around that 30-day mark, because if they're under that 30-day mark, in a lot of states, they're trespassing and you can get them out. Once they get over that mark, then they're considered tenants and you've got to go through an eviction, which there's a moratorium on right now. So it makes it very difficult. So I've not ever had to go through that. We always screen for 5-star. That's another aspect of this. When we get into the automation of guest bookings, you can screen for previous 5-star reviews. So we typically have really great guests, even though there's scammers out there who try to book properties just to, squat in them or whatever. But you can typically sort through those pretty easily because it's hard to fake 5-star reviews on there. And we require deposits in some cases, different things. Really appreciate your work. I'm in a high housing costs area and wonder if you found duplexes to be a good way to manage that. Sarah, great question. Yes. So we have 2 duplexes right now, which are some of the best performers we have. I showed you the one that we bought for $24,500. We gut rehabbed it, but we have like just over 100,000 into it, and it kills it. And it's one of our most affordable ones, but you're getting twice the income for the same. Our total mortgage on that property is $550, I think, right around $550. So we're making in the summer. We're making about $7,000 to $8,000 on it because we have one listing as both units together, and then we have one listing for the upper and one listing for the downstairs unit, and they're all tied together. So you can't double book any of them. But we set a premium on the on the double, the 2 units together because it's not common, and a lot of people want to have 2 units because they're traveling, especially in the summer. They're traveling with 2 families or multiple, friends or families, and they want their own space. So they'll pay a lot more, and it sleeps a lot. So we get a great premium all summer. For the most part, it's the 2 units are booked together as one listing. And then in the winter, you've got the flexibility of people who just want to get out of the city, come go to the casino for a long weekend. And it's a very affordable place for them. So great question. It's a great way to, I'll go through that in the program too. Like, up to 4 units, you can get conventional financing on just a regular 30-year mortgage if you're working a W-2 and get some of the cheapest financing that's ever existed and make crazy cash flow. So do you have experience with other rental companies besides Airbnb? So other short-term rental platforms like VRBO or HomeAway. I do now. We're on multiple. That did not occur until several years after we started. In the beginning, I just recommend Daniel Roostein, who was just on the podcast and teaches how to optimize your B&B, recommends just being on AirBNB. And I think it's a great way to build up your profile. It's the elephant in the room. It's got the biggest market share by a mile, so you don't need to try to figure out 15 platforms. I think it's just going to slow you down. Just figure out one, get really good at one, manage it on one. Once you have multiple, then you've got to get a property management, third-party software to tie them all together. It starts to get a little more complex, and simplicity is the way in the beginning to get to the goal that you want, the outcome that you want. So, what are the best methods for finding a good cleaner and a good handyman? Great question. There's, again, I couldn't go through everything in this. We're going to go through that in detail in the program, but referrals, if you go back and watch that video that I created, there's a link to it in the chat here. Heather put a link to it. It's on how I create a relationship with the contractor. I talk in there about what to look for in a contractor and then where to find a great contractor. So I'd recommend watching that. There's a few different things, but referrals are the main way that I get a great contractor. And there's different methods for getting referrals that I'll talk through, but you want a track record. You want to see that they've done this before. 90-something% of the people that have ever burned me in the past, I've looked back and seen there was no track record of any success. The only thing I was believing is what they were telling me, and everyone will tell you how great they are. So, so hopefully that's helpful. Thanks so much, Kirby and team. Just booked the call. Looking forward to it. Also, thanks for so much value. Awesome. Thank you, Valerie. I really appreciate you being on the call tonight. Thanks, Maria. Cool. So I think I got everything. If there's any other questions that I didn't cover, I'm happy to just book a call with me, and I'm happy to jump on a call, and we can talk through it and talk through your goals. I hope to talk to you soon. So Xavier, thanks a lot, man. I'm looking forward to talking to you. All right. Thanks, Adam. All right. See you guys. I'll talk to you soon.